All right. Good morning, everyone, and thank you again for joining us this morning for the webinar about cybersecurity for financial firms. SSE Network Services is a local IT and technology solution provider, and our mission is to accelerate business through technology-enabled solutions and services. And for over 30 years now, SSE has partnered with banks and financial firms in the St. Louis and the surrounding area with enhancing cybersecurity measures and processes, optimizing technology utilized on a daily basis, and ensuring that regulatory compliance requirements for technology are met. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our presenter for today, Vince Sechrest. He is SSE's Virtual Chief Information Officer, and Vince is instrumental to our continued success and partnerships with his hands-on approach with our clients, ensuring that they're ready for audits, strategic planning for the future, and ensuring SSE is delivering on everything we say we will. And with no further delays, Vince, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Tom. So if you have any questions as we're going along, there is a box you can put the questions in, and Tom will cover those at the end. This is an updated presentation that we've just updated for this quarter. So, and it is focused on financial firms. So we have a lot of new and updated information there as we're proceeding along. I've got my little pointer here, so I'll try to highlight some things as we're going along, and let's just get started. So I always like to start out with like a comic strip, but in general, put this in here because when I saw this, it strikes me about the biggest problem we see out there, and that's just people take actions and do things without thinking about it, without common sense. So there's one takeaway today is common sense, really, through the whole process. So really three things we hope to cover today. I've had an opportunity to look through the Verizon Wireless Data Breach Report for 2019, and they've got some startling new statistics in there. We've highlighted 11 security risks based on our own firsthand experience and put in 16 best practices that we believe through the School of Hard Knocks can help you best protect your business. So number one, 91% of cyber attacks start with email. So this is why email and the email vector is so critical. We're going to be talking about that today, but that's a startling statistic. 43% of the breaches seen in the recent survey involved small business victims. 10% of the breaches this past round involved the financial industry. 94% of the malware that was delivered via email. And a very, very interesting statistic, 45% of the malware file types were delivered via Office documents. So just think about how often you get an email and you have a Word or Excel attachment. Just keep this in mind. And then, of course, the age-old statistic we kept in there is 60% of small businesses that suffer a cyber attack are out of business within 6 months. So just keep that in mind. So let's go ahead and get started on the risk side of the house. So looking at the risks, we do like to highlight the number one risk in your organization is your employees, because they are the folks on the front line. You can put in the best firewalls, the best policy, the best procedure, but at the end of the day, they're the folks opening the emails, clicking on links, downloading files, and accidentally sending out information. So that, as you will see, will be a theme today. In the financial industry, we have firsthand experience and can confidently say that after your employees, your customers are probably your second biggest risk. We have seen a lot of transfers happen, and inevitably it involves the fact that you can manage your network, but users at home have their own computers used by multiple folks, so they may be in an unmanaged environment. And long story short, we have seen multiple incidents of home computers being infected, and then hackers come in and take over the identity of the home user and start emailing folks at the bank and essentially take over that user's identity. If the bank or financial firm ends up initiating a transaction without verifying the authenticity of this, inevitably they lose funds. Third risk, untested disaster recovery solution. This used to be near the end of the presentation. I moved it up to the front. And reason it's up to the front is most of the organizations, every organization typically is going to have a backup and some type of disaster recovery solution. But the thing that I highlight is untested. We have one organization that goes through an official and formal test each year. And I can assure you that when we do that, we always find there are a lot of issues in the process side and the people side. Because at the end of the day, if you're going to do a successful recovery, particularly if it's in an alternate location, you're going to need a marriage of people, process, and technology. So the challenges that we see with disaster recovery are primarily issues of timing, communication, an alternate assembly location, which systems need to be recovered, how are users going to get access, if the main facility is not available, what equipment are they going to use, do they know actually how to get in, and has it been tested and validated? So we'll talk about those more when we get into the solution section. Number 4 on the list now is users logged in with administrative access. We have seen just in the past quarter, I would say about 4 firms have gotten some form of malware infection. And when they do get malware infection, if that user is logged in with administrative rights, then the malware has the same rights that they do. So a lot of financial organizations that we work with like to have users have full access, but this can be really dangerous because if the user is infected, malware can cause inadvertent system modifications, basically has a run of the mill. So this is something that we're working near and dear with many of our clients to review, identify, and clean up. Crypto, ransomware. So ransomware is in no short supply. This is still out there. Customers are still getting links. They're still getting their data encrypted. Back to that admin user. The user's on the network and has full rights, and they get ransomware, then the ransomware has full rights. There is the crypto version, the locker version. We're typically seeing the crypto version the most. And in general, if you end up with ransomware, of course, you either have to pay or you're going to have to go back to that backup and recovery solution that we just talked about. After that, of course, social engineering. This is getting more and more prevalent because it's low cost, it's easy to do. Hackers can do it anywhere in the world. And just in general, they're trying to trick you into giving up key information. Spear phishing. This, of course, is a more targeted version of social engineering, but it is the idea that, in essence, a hacker or someone outside of your organization can come to your website, and if you have enough information on your website that they can identify some key employees, they can search the internet and identify some key businesses. It does not take much to develop a targeted email to the key officers in the company. Keep in mind that if you send out 10 targeted emails, we have a 90% chance of getting 1 click, and anything over 0 is too much because the malware is inside and they're already able to move laterally in the business. Looking down the list further, end-of-life systems. This has moved up high on the list. This used to be further down. But end-of-life systems are primarily computers and other systems or other devices on the network that are going to fall in a state of, I want to say, disrepair, like non-managed. So we have 3 big candidates coming up at the beginning of 2020 and 1 at the end of 2020. Those are Windows 7, Windows Server 2008, and Office 2010. But in general, the idea and concept is in order to have a safe and secure network, you want to make sure all of the software and the hardware in your environment is being actively managed and supported so that you have some sense that someone's watching it and that it is secure. Number 9 on the list, open source software. This is really a topic that we get questions on all the time. I get questions on this all the time People find free versions of software that replace commercial versions. So they find free versions to replace Adobe Acrobat, Adobe Photoshop, fax creation software. Just keep in mind that the big concern with open source software is there's really no way to ensure long-term stability of that software. And the biggest issue is if there are security vulnerabilities, we have no mechanism to ensure they're closed on a regular basis. And companies that are using these type of tools, if they do get hacked, then we find that there's nowhere we can turn to from that vendor perspective to get any type of support. Next item on the list, and this has moved up from the end of the list, is I think I read an article here a while back that today's smartphones are many times more powerful than the computers that managed the Apollo program where we landed on the moon. And so corresponding to that, we have a lot of instances of people having mobile devices such as cell phones. People have a tendency to think that they maybe are not a threat. Just keep in mind that out there in the App Store for both Apple and Android, there are all types of scanning and scavenging and data collection tools. So if you allow a smartphone or a home managed computer onto your internal network, what you're essentially doing is allowing tools into the network that you are not managing. So you really have no idea if those tools are collecting information and disseminating it to the outside. So we'll talk about that a little bit further. Public Wi-Fi. Most of us use public Wi-Fi at one time or another. I particularly am forced to use it if for some reason I can't use my hotspot. But just keep in mind that if you're outside of your organization and you're using public Wi-Fi, the risk is that a hacker, if you're at, for example, let's say Starbucks and they have AT&T Wi-Fi, I can easily rename my hotspot AT&T Wi-Fi, and now you are connecting to me, not AT&T, which essentially puts me as a man in the middle between you and your destination. So just be mindful that public networks are great places to read news. They are not places to log into any user-based accounts. Okay. Now we're ready to move on and talk about some of the best practices to protect your organization. This is greatly updated on the based on the FFEIC document. So first suggestion I would have is to conduct a complete assessment of your IT environment. And if you haven't done this already, cover people, process, and technology with a focus on all the risks that we've covered today. It's always a challenge to know where to start, but the best place is really understanding, based on your custom current environment, where are your risks today. Second is you need to consider, and consider this really as a long-term goal, and that is working toward a culture of security. I know a lot of folks and they have done this and are doing this, but many have not. So it's really getting your users to realize security is a process, not a product. If auditors come in, they could look at board notes, charts, notes under your desk. So we're really wanting to get a setup where your users are not only aware of security, but they're reporting incidents. And at the end of the day, we want to have a greater internal and external trust, which gives us more consistent results. And it's easier then to show compliance, and that provides value across the enterprise. Number 3, we do highly suggest now a continuous user phishing and education program. This is because the hackers are just getting more clever, they're getting more sophisticated, and the only way you can get better at something on your user side is to really have them in a constant training program. So again, an ongoing social engineering test where you're continuously sharing the results with your staff. You're requiring training on the failed tests. A couple of our organizations are publicly reporting even individuals, which has had some interesting results. And then you're looking at trends over time to see how the ongoing education program is working. Are you getting better, worse? Are there certain areas? Organizations we've worked to set this up so far has been to set these up based on the types of users so that we have different attacks based on the category of user. So one might be the C-level folks, the management staff, regular staff, accounting staff, field staff. And this lets you very easily perform what I would say targeted fear phishing attacks to that group, which means they're more likely to open it. And it also lets you see how the vulnerabilities differ based on the different roles in your organization. Number 4, you really want to focus on training your employees to recognize phishing attempts. And that's the real big purpose of the ongoing phishing program. So the next few slides are really just educational reminders of things that you want to make sure your users are aware of. So I think most people know that you cannot assume an email you get is from the person forwarded in the email. We have even done showing some users how to open an email header and look in it and see where it really came from. For folks that we're working with, if there's any question, open a new email to us, drag it in as an attachment to that email. That will preserve the header. You can send it to the help desk, and we will very quickly be able to see if it's from that originator. Just keep in mind that these particular exploits are trying to leverage trust and curiosity with your user base, or create a compelling call to action, or ask users to respond to things that actually never happen. But as we're going to see in a few minutes, there are a lot of key flags like spelling and typos that really give away the fact that these are exploits. I just wanted to show you a few examples. Like here is an example. This is an actual live example from January of this year. We had about 3 or 4 customers receiving this email. But in essence, what you'll see in this email is they're essentially sending it to your user base, saying they've been watching the user for some period of time, hence the scare tactic. And they are presuming and saying to the user, we've caught you, we know you've been doing things you shouldn't, and if you don't want anybody to know, you're going to have to pay us some money, and you're going to need to do it in a quick period of time. So this is just, again, a very current example. Other examples that we see all the time are popping up something that looks innocuous, like Google. People use Google all the time. So people see the Google logo, Google colors. They're a lot more likely just to click on a link. But we just need to get users educated to know that no matter how friendly it looks, we don't want to install anything. We want that to all be controlled in-house. Other things that are big examples is people get email that's purported to be from somewhere. So for example, this comes and says it's from Apple, but actually it has a different email address. So we can get people to focus, look at the email address, basically make sure it matches the name. And if there are links, for example, learn more, and you hover over it, you can see that this is going outside of the organization. It is not an email address or website that you're going to find inside of Apple. Here's another example. Hackers will pop up a window. It's actually a web window, but it's designed, they basically pop up a picture in a web window, and it's designed to look like your security software. So just getting users familiar with not clicking on things that look unfamiliar, but hackers exploit that this looks professional, it looks like an issue, it shows alerts that cause people to think that their protection is off and they've got issues. Actually, this entire screen is a button. So if they click anywhere on the screen, it's going to go ahead and institute whatever attack, regardless of whether they click down here, scan now, update, all doesn't matter. Here are other examples around the holiday. This is the way to get people send them out a fake shipment link in their shipment status with an outside link. Another one that we've seen just recently is people getting one on Amazon saying your Amazon account has been charged, and they list a bogus charge, and people see that and they think, oh, that's not something I did. They click on the link. So the bottom takeaway is we just need to get your users to realize don't click on links, don't open attachments, don't call numbers and email, call back. This is a tool that I've shared with some folks, but not everybody. As we've said, the general rule is don't open email, don't open attachments, don't click on links. But if you have a link or you have an attachment and you're just wondering, is this a malware infected attachment? You can go to virustotal.com, and if you're very careful, you can click on file and you can upload the file in question, or you can click URL and type in the website in question. The benefit here is in this particular instance, if you uploaded a file or a website, it is going to check that piece of that tool, that Word document, that Excel document, or that website. It's going to scan it against 68 known antivirus tools. So in one click, you've got 68 scans. So even if it's an unknown entity, you have a much better sense that this is something that's good or bad. Okay, continuing on. As we mentioned, number 2 was your customer base. So consider sponsoring a customer security awareness event. We've seen some clients do this. They've had good attendance, and it's just really a good way to educate your users on some of these risks that they may not otherwise be aware of. Number 6, we talked about the importance of a backup and recovery solution and doing the test. Here's kind of a formula that we've followed that we've found to be successful. Doing a half-day testing, doing 1 half-day prep session, documenting critical business functions, required recovery times, critical and necessary job functions, key staff, critical equipment, telecommuting alternatives, and a test recovery location, along with a communication plan, which then gets published. And ideally, it's put in a business continuity disaster recovery binder that is easy to access. You then simulate a recall or recovery. You test bringing up the critical systems needed within a predefined time. You make sure that the users in question can use a method to access the data in question, that they have the right rights in place. Generally, for all the core critical applications, we conduct, document, and test, read, write, change, and update of critical information, debrief and document, and then after, you have an after actions get together where you're really reviewing all the things that happened, and you're developing mitigation strategies for weak points, and then you're just testing again next year. Again, we see everybody has a DR solution, 1% actually tested. Number 7, enforce a secure password program. We find that folks do a lot of different things out there, but the biggest thing they do is ask us to exclude some accounts from password changes. So even though they have a password program, we have certain user accounts where the passwords do not change. But in general, we'd like to get folks to use passwords that are not in the dictionary or family names, where they're not reusing across accounts. We would like them to think about using a password manager, LastPass, 1Password, or a couple of them out there. Keep in mind that these are all pros and cons. They can give you better passwords, but they can also be a one-source stop for hacking if those aren't protected. We like to get folks to use complexity, which is hard for most people. So what we suggest is to use complexity instead of using just a simple password. Pick a sentence and then use the first letter of each sentence to create your password. And then what we basically know is that if you had a very short password, in this case you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 characters, a 5-character password, there are hacking tools that can test every variation of 5 characters and break it in 16 minutes. Adding it to 6 characters takes it to 5 hours. 7 characters takes it to 3 days. 8 takes it to 4 months. 9 takes it to 26 years. So these are all things that you can do, very simple. So in general, you want to have 9+ characters, passwords that you're not reusing, passwords that you change on some frequency other than that. And then, of course, a password is no good if people have to write it down. So that's why if you have complex passwords, you want to give them some mechanism where they don't have to write it down. In general, you shouldn't be sending passwords through email. The reason being is if a hacker compromises your email and you've used your email to register your identity with your accounts, then they're able to reset and get into all of your accounts by access to your email. Of course, never tell anyone your passwords. Don't reveal your passwords. In a live presentation, I showed folks that if you use the Remember Password on your phones, there's actually a button, particularly on the iPhone, called Passwords, where you can go in. If someone has access to your phone, they can get every password you've ever had from your phone. And then the big tip is don't mix your personal and corporate passwords. Don't use the same password everywhere, particularly if you're going to try to reuse accounts, which you shouldn't. Consider to have different accounts for business and personal, and particularly yet another different account for your financial side of the house. Validate user accounts and access controls. In general, everybody has users that are going to come and go in a business. Most folks are managing those users in Active Directory. Users get added to Active Directory, but for whatever reason, we find a lot of clients, a lot of folks out there that these user accounts are never being deleted. So in general, it'd be suggested just to review all the user accounts, disable accounts of departing employees, and delete old accounts after 30 days. The same with computer accounts. In general, folks keep these around because they think a computer might be turned back on, but that's just something that ultimately needs to get out of there. And then in addition to user account, computer accounts, access control, this is a big challenge that we see, an ongoing challenge. People get more and more data, but they do not stop and take time to review their security and data access roles set up on their network, or to review the corresponding security groups out there. So you want to spend some time looking at the groups out there, validating the access rights to the groups, and just in general, don't do what we see, which is everybody has full access to everything, which means if the user gets malware, the malware has access to everything. Number 10, we want to talk a little bit about segregating personal devices from corporate devices. Simple way to do this is to have a public and a private network and make folks have private devices on the public network. That completely circumvents the issue of people having unmanaged software, collecting data, and disseminating it. Takes that whole risk out. Number 11, we talked about the open Wi-Fi. Simple thing I would suggest is use VPN if you're on a public Wi-Fi. That will limit it. If you don't have VPN, only connect to sites that have HTTPS. If you ever go into an open Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi situation, and all of the Wi-Fi networks you have ever connected to appear available, including your home network, you know you're in an environment where they're using a Wi-Fi pineapple and they're emulating all these networks, so therefore don't connect to any of them. You want to, and these are other things just to keep in mind. Lifecycle management program. The reason here is computers get older, they get slower as time goes by. What we found is computers are low cost enough that if you just have a schedule of replacing them every 3 to 4 years, this is going to do a lot for you. It's going to keep your hardware updated. It's going to keep your software updated. It's going to keep the applications updated. So we suggest a 3 to 4 year cycle for workstations, 5 for servers, maximum of 7 for operating systems, typically 5 for Office, and warranties on all servers with no open source software. Okay, used to be good enough to just have a primary antivirus. We are evaluating alternate solutions right now for secondary protection. Just keep in mind there is no one size fit all. We have some clients who believe antivirus catches 100% of viruses. Just keep in mind that even the best AV out there can only capture and protect against about 80% of viruses. So if you're looking at two, one would be a signature-based tool such as ESET, which is we use, but we're also looking at a behavior-based tool such as CrowdStrike. We're evaluating that right now in the lab to see if that might be an alternative. But basically, it's looking at the concept of deploying two alternate solutions that can work in conjunction with each other but don't step on each other, and together provide more protection than they would by themselves. Ensuring comprehensive updates of the operating system, apps, and third party. You probably know that Java just changed their licensing, which prevents third party tools from doing direct updates. So we've actually had some clients actually completely remove Java. We are evaluating a tool to help us to better do this now, but updates are always a challenge. Make sure they're in place and 100% working, but you do need some mechanism to make sure you're patched, and patching needs to include the operating system, the applications, and the third party modules. Finally, I pasted this in here for you to get it all on one screen. This is a summary of what you will find on in the cybersecurity assessment tool. And in particular, this is a screenshot of what's covered in the FFEIC IT exam handbook. You'll see it covers all of these different areas. And in general, these are the areas that your auditors are going to be interested in. And in particular, we're seeing a push towards reporting. So not only do you need to manage all these areas, you need to track these in your meeting notes, your board minutes, that you are looking at your reports, you're looking at the risks, you're making informed decisions, and you're tracking the results of those. So when the auditors come in, they know you have a program in place. And then finally, just remember, why does phishing keep working? And that's because no matter how much we do, people, process, and technology, and training, if you send out enough spam emails, there will be somebody that will fall for it. And that really completes my part there for this.
All right, Vince, thank you very much for all the information. A lot of scary stuff out there, I know, especially with the financial industry. I mean, it's the one thing that I don't think any company can solve completely is the human element, but we just do everything we can to, manage what we have in the best of our abilities. I do see that there was one question that, Vince, you mentioned something about conducting an IT assessment. Do you have any recommendations on tools to use for this assessment?
That's a good question. Of course, we would always say come to us, but the tool that we use is we use a commercial tool from a company called Rapid Fire Tools. It's called Network Detective. It's an appliance. So you go out and you purchase an outside assessment. You're going to spend thousands of dollars. A lot of times they are going to use one of these tools anyway. So again, the tool we use is from Rapid Fire Tools, Network Detective. What it actually does is it can do an external pen test. It can do internal pen testing. It can do vulnerability scans on all the devices. It can give a complete, independent, outside assessment as to what's going on in the network. And not only does it do that, it puts them in Word document format, give you about 1,500 pages of reports. It includes network views of networks. It includes device views of networks. They've even recently added user security, where you can see by the network, across the network, computer devices that a user is trying to access, or computer devices that users are trying to access. So it's just a very helpful tool.
Perfect. I did see one last question here. In regards to the cybersecurity awareness training, training the employees, do you have any recommendations on frequency of how often the employee should be tested for, spear phishing and phishing?
So that's really an interesting question. So we had one client that, said, hey, what do you think we should do? What we did with them is we started with them, we broke their users up into 4 groups, and we did once a month testing. And we did that actually for about 3 months. They came back and we showed them the results, and they said, well, our feeling is that once a month is not enough. So we are then modeling once a week. That's actually happening right now. My own gut is it's probably somewhere in the middle for the typical organization, which would probably be twice a month on a staggered basis, because we get that prairie dog effect, where if we send all the emails out at once, one person says, hey, I got all these fake emails, and then everybody's looking for them. So the idea is you stagger them so that users are not able to use the prairie dog. So I guess I would say twice a month would probably be a good place to start based on my experience.
Perfect. Are there any additional questions out there?
I did have a question.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay. I wanted to make sure I wasn't on mute or anything on your end. So, Vince, you had alluded to the fact that the Java piece was no longer being updated by the third party. I guess my question is two. One is what would be the rationale for Java to not allow updates to happen automatically if they're not going to do that? And two, how is that affecting the piece? So for example, I mean, that was one of the things we were obviously having updated. So what is it that we need to do to make sure that that maintains being updated, since I wasn't aware that had ceased?
Yeah. So what is the rationale? The best I could tell is they changed their licensing, so they're trying to get licensing fees. So best I can tell is they're trying to make some money off of their Java software out there. So since they basically have said anybody touching them needs to pay money, all these third-party vendors have stepped out. So right now, unfortunately, at this very moment, we either have to do it manually or we have to remove Java, which is just painful. Both of those are not good options.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, we don't necessarily inherently choose to use Java. It's a component of the products that our software utilizes. Am I not correct in that?
Yep. So so I guess short term you're going to be restricted to having to do it manually, but I mean long term, I think a lot of firms, my gut reaction would be, if there's no way to patch it and maintain it in a cost-effective way, they're going to need to work with their vendor to find an alternate solution over Java, which is probably some other type of a plug-in instead of Java.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, it was just a new development, and we are working, right now we're evaluating a new patching tool, and we're talking to them about these things, but there's just no magic bullet answer on that one right now. Any other questions out there?
Okay. Oh, appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
So thank you guys so much for attending. If you're not 100% confident that your IT environment has the appropriate cybersecurity measures and processes in place today, or if you're not 100% confident you're ready for your next regulatory audit for your technology, we should definitely carve out 30 minutes just to speak further. We would be happy to learn where you lack confidence or know of a potential issue and discuss together what the right next step should be. We can even complete a free network audit to verify with you that there are no additional gaps that can come back to impede your audit's success or become a threat to your company's reputation and clients' data. In the end, we want to just be a resource and a trusted partner that you can turn to when you are not sure or not confident with your IT and technology. And I will be following up by phone in the coming days only to see if there are any questions that were left unanswered or if SSE can be a resource in other ways. want to say thank you again to everyone for attending, and have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you.